They are saying she let Lord Carrick into the conservatory alone, that she is ruined and worse, and not fit to be received. The voice hissed behind a painted fan, and the Duke of Havenwood, standing near enough to hear it, felt his jaw go hard as flint. He knew the voice, he knew the malice in it. And he knew, across the glittering length of the candlelit ballroom, the girl they were destroying, Eleanor Pike, a quiet, overlooked young woman in a plain gown, standing near the windows with her chin up and her face white, pretending not to hear the whispers that were spreading through the company like fire through dry gorse. He knew, too, that the rumor was a lie. He had been in the conservatory himself not an hour past, alone, to escape the crush. He had seen Lord Carrick nowhere near it. The whole vicious story had been invented out of spite by a jealous coterie who had decided to ruin a girl too poor and too unguarded to defend herself. By morning it would be everywhere. By the end of the week she would be cut by every hostess in town, her name a byword, her one season ended, her future closed. A lie, and it would destroy her as surely as a truth, because the world did not stop to ask which it was. Hamish, the Duke of Havenwood, watched the whispers reach her, watched her stand and bear them with a dignity that wrung his hard heart, and in the space of a single held breath he made a decision that would alter both their lives. He crossed the ballroom. He did not hurry. A duke does not hurry. But every eye in the room turned to follow him, the feared and reserved Duke of Havenwood cutting through the dancers, and a hush spread before him, so that by the time he reached the windows where Eleanor Pike stood alone, half the company was watching, and the malicious fans had stilled to see what the great man meant to do. "Miss Pike," the Duke said. She looked up at him, startled, her grey eyes wide and bright with the tears she would not let fall. "Your Grace." Her voice did not shake, which he admired more than he could have said. "You should not be seen speaking to me. You will not have heard, but—" "I have heard," he said. "Every word of it. It is a lie, and I know it to be a lie, because I was in the conservatory myself this past hour, and there was no one there at all." He held her eyes. "But you cannot prove that, and my saying it will not be believed, because they do not wish to believe it. A denial only feeds the fire. They will say I am gallant, or deceived, and tomorrow you will be ruined all the same." "Then there is nothing to be done," she whispered. "I thank you for your kindness, your grace, but—" "There is one thing to be done," said the Duke of Havenwood, "and I am going to do it, and I beg your pardon for it, because there is no time to ask your leave, and I would not have you ruined for the want of a moment's boldness. Forgive me, Eleanor." And before the whole assembled glittering company, before the malicious fans and the staring matrons and the gossiping young men, in the full blaze of the chandelier light, the Duke of Havenwood took Eleanor Pike's face gently between his two hands and bent and kissed her once. A single grave protective kiss, his hands cradling her face as though she were something precious, and then he drew back and faced the room. The ballroom had gone utterly silent. The music had stopped. 400 people stood frozen, and the gasping rippled outward, and the painted fans flew up, and the whole brilliant company stared at the sight of the unmarriageable Duke of Havenwood kissing the ruined girl in front of them all. It was, of course, a far greater scandal than the first, and that was precisely the point. Because now there was only one thing the world could say about Eleanor Pike. Not that she had crept into a conservatory with Lord Carrick. That lie was swept clean away, buried under the enormous undeniable fact of what they had all just witnessed. Now the only story was that the Duke of Havenwood had compromised her in the open ballroom, and there was only one honourable end to such a thing, and every soul in that room knew it. "You have ruined yourself," Eleanor breathed, staring up at him, trembling. "Your Grace, your name, you have thrown your own honour into the fire to pull me out of it. Why? Why would you?" "Because I will not stand in a room and watch a good woman destroyed by liars," the Duke said quietly, for her ears alone, even as the uproar broke around them. and because there was no other way to silence it that would not leave you ruined. A scandal can only be buried by a greater scandal. I have given them a greater one, and I will give them, in a moment, the honorable end of it, if you will permit me." He looked down at her, and something in his hard, reserved face had gone unguarded. "I have only one regret in what I have just done, Eleanor, and it is that I did it to save you rather than because I had earned the right. Let me earn it." He turned to face the room and raised his voice so that it carried to every corner of that vast gold chamber. "You have all seen," said the Duke of Havenwood, "what I have done. There is one honourable course open to a gentleman who so compromises a lady, and I take it gladly and without an instant's reluctance. Miss Eleanor Pike has done me the very great honour," he turned back to her, and his dark eyes held hers, "of accepting, I hope, my hand in marriage. We are betrothed, and any soul in this room who speaks otherwise, or repeats a single word of the filth that was whispered here tonight, will answer to me for it." There was no whisper after that. There was not one. The vicious coterie behind the fans had been routed in a single stroke, their lie demolished, their victim raised in an instant from disgrace to the betrothed of the most powerful man in 3 counties. The hostess hurried to signal the musicians. The dancing resumed in a daze, and the Duke of Havenwood drew Eleanor Pike's cold hand through his arm and led her out onto the terrace, into the cool dark and the quiet, away from the staring eyes. "You need not marry me," she said the moment they were alone, turning to him in the starlight, her composure breaking at last. "Your Grace, Hamish, you did a noble thing, a generous thing, but you said it to save me, and I will not hold you to a betrothal made to silence a mob. In a week the talk will die. You may quietly cry off, and only I will be the worse for it, and I would rather be ruined alone than be the ruin of a man who tried to save me. I release you. Do you hear? I release you." The Duke of Havenwood looked down at her in the starlight, at the plain brave girl who, in the moment of her own rescue, was trying to set her rescuer free at the cost of herself, and he understood, with a sudden clarity that took his breath, that he did not in the least want to be released. "You truly mean it," he said slowly. "You would take the ruin back upon yourself to spare me?" "Of course I would. You did not deserve to be dragged into my disgrace." "Eleanor," he took both her hands, "I have spent 8 years being courted and flattered and married toward by every ambitious creature who could get within speaking distance of me, and not one of them, in all that time, ever once thought of my good before their own. And here you stand, 3 minutes betrothed to the greatest match in the country, trying with your whole heart to give it back to me." He shook his head, and something like wonder was in his face. "I crossed that ballroom to silence a rumor. I will be honest with you. I told myself it was only honor, only decency, that no good woman should be destroyed by liars while I stood idle. But I have been watching you the whole of this season, Eleanor Pike. The plain, quiet one in the corner who is kinder than all the beauties and braver than all the men. I knew your name long before tonight. I did not cross that room only out of honor. I crossed it because I could not bear to lose you, and tonight gave me the courage I had wanted all season and never found." Eleanor stared at him, her lips parted, the tears spilling over at last. "You are not saying this from honor," she whispered. "You truly—" "I truly," said the Duke of Havenwood, and lifted her hands to his lips. "Not to silence a rumor, not to do the correct thing. I am asking you here, in the dark where there is no one to perform for, because I want you for my wife, and I have wanted it longer than I dared admit. The kiss in the ballroom was to save you. This," he pressed his mouth grave and tender to her cold fingers, "is for me. Will you have me, Eleanor? Not because I compromised you. Because I love you, and have, I think, since the first quiet evening I watched you give up your own place in a set so that a wallflower more frightened than yourself need not sit out the dance." She was weeping now in earnest and laughing through it, and her hands had turned to grip his. "You saw that?" "I see everything you do," he said, It is the great affliction of my season. Marry me and put me out of my misery." "Yes," Eleanor Pike said. "Yes, not because you must not to mend my name, but because I think I have loved you a little since the night you spoke so gently to the old dowager that everyone else had abandoned, and I never dreamed you had so much as marked my existence." She pressed his hands to her cheek. "Yes, Hamish. With my whole heart, yes." And the Duke of Havenwood drew her gently into the circle of his arm, there on the dark terrace, under the cold stars, and held her while she steadied, her bright head against his shoulder, the gold light and the music spilling out behind them from the ballroom where, an hour before, they had tried to destroy her. They were married that summer, and the vicious coterie who had invented the lie found themselves, to their lasting mortification, no longer received anywhere that mattered, while Eleanor, the overlooked girl they had tried to ruin, sat at the right hand of the Duke of Havenwood, and was sought after by the very people who had whispered behind their fans. She bore it all with the same quiet grace, and was kind to those who had been cruel, which mortified them more than any revenge could have done. But the kindest thing of all came years later, when their own daughter asked her mother how the great Duke had come to choose her, of all the beauties of that long-ago season. And Eleanor only smiled, and looked across the firelit room at her grey-haired husband and said, "He crossed a whole ballroom to save my name, my love, when no one else would so much as meet my eye, and then he found he could not give me back. That is how I knew. A man may do a noble thing from honour, but he does not cross a crowded room for a girl in the corner unless his heart went first and brought him after."